Welcome to this episode of Keeping It Green. I'm your co-host, Erin Lefebvre, and on this last day of March, we're here at Steve and Ellen Terwilliger's house in Eau Claire, and we're going to be talking about seed starting. Welcome to this episode, Ellen.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Can you tell us what are some reasons people would want to start seeds?
Well, at this time of the year, and if you can look, it's kind of dreary. Last year at this time of the year, we were about 2-3 feet deep in snow. It's a great time to see something green, to get your hands into dirt, and that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons I do it. Another reason that many people start their own seeds, especially if they do extensive gardening, is to save on money. A very important reason for Steve and I is that we really try to stay away from insecticides and pesticides and added chemicals because we do grow a lot of our own food. And so when you start your own seeds, you know what's going into it right from the very start. And I think a final reason that's very important for many people is that you can pick out whatever you want and things that you might not find in local nurseries. So you can have a greater variety of tomatoes or different flowers that you might not find locally.
Or maybe somebody gives you a rare variety that they're growing in their garden, and the only way to get it going is to start it indoors.
Right,
yes.
With seeds that they have given you.
Right.
Absolutely.
And what about the idea that some plants need longer to grow than our season can provide?
Right, we're a zone 4, and our growing season, some years our growing season is just really several months, and so by starting the seeds indoors, you're going to get flowers sooner, vegetables sooner, and you get them going. Whereas if you waited, you might not get things harvested or blooming before frost.
So what are some of the first things you want to do when starting to plan to start seeds?
The very first thing you want to think about if it's your first time doing seedlings is to decide what you would like to grow. Are you just going to do flowers? Are you going to do vegetables? If so, what kind of vegetables, what kind of flowers? So it's helpful to draw out a plan or to have an idea of what you would like. And then you'll want to order your seeds. And if you haven't ordered seeds from a catalog early enough or off the internet, there are plenty of seeds locally that you can get in grocery stores, at nurseries, at some of the different box stores. So those are all options. You'll also want to gather all of your supplies, and we'll talk in a moment about what some of those supplies are. But when you have everything together and ready, it just makes it a lot easier.
Well, why don't we take a trip into your greenhouse and start putting together some seeds?
All right.
Where can a person purchase seeds?
There are a lot of places these days that you can get seeds. If you plan ahead, seed catalogs are great. I'm a big fan of Burpee. We've used Jung's Seed Saver Exchange. There's all kinds of them that are available. If you don't get them already, you can go online and fill out a request and they will happily send you seeds, or you can just order seeds online. When I don't plan ahead, local grocery stores, box stores are great places to go and pick up some of your seeds. Most years I save some seeds, like I go out and collect nasturtium seeds and then dry them, marigold seeds. As long as you're not saving a hybrid seed, it's just not a problem at all. The other thing that some people do is to exchange seeds with other gardeners. And it's real nice. The library is starting a seed exchange program here in Eau Claire, so that'll be a real nice option for people too.
Yes, it's one of the first in the area that they've had started, and it'll start April 18th.
Great.
So that'll be a fun place.
We grow in our garden both vegetables and flowers. Some of the seeds that you see are a variety of tomatoes, peppers, broccoli. We figure we grow about 30% of our own food out of our garden, and we eat from it all year long. We're still eating squash, we're still eating onions, potatoes, lettuce that we grow during the winter. So the seeds represent those things. But I also am an avid flower gardener, so I like to have some annuals because they provide color throughout the year. So,
what are some of the materials we need to have on hand in order to start seeds?
Some of the things that are really helpful to have, and you can make do with a lot of things, but I do find it helpful to just get some trays that are waterproof so that if you are starting seeds inside, you're not going to have water dripping out of holes of your insets. You need something to set inside. I like to save my 4-inch pots and then just clean them out every year, and I put in potting soil. You can use an actual seed starting mix, or you can use potting soil. I tend to use an organic one, but you can also just mix up your own using an equal part of compost, perlite, and some peat moss, and that works out really well. I'm a bit lazy. I just go out and buy the ready-made. It has fertilizer in it, so I'm not having to worry about that component. Another thing that really makes a difference is to have a cover so that it's like a little mini greenhouse, and that's very helpful. So you can use bigger trays. You can also use a smaller tray, and these are very handy because you can just, instead of watering from the top, you can water in the bottom, and then again you have your inset, and then you've got the little cover. So those things are very helpful. And then I also use warm water once so you want access to water as you are planting. And then it is not necessary but helpful if you are new to planting seedlings to label your seeds. So I use old Venetian blinds and a permanent marker and tuck those in so I know what I have coming up. It's especially helpful if you are growing like different kinds of tomatoes, then you know which kind it is so you can remember for next year.
What is a key point of the pot? I mean, what kind of things do we need to consider when choosing what kind of containers to use for seed starting?
I think part of it depends on how large you want that plant to get. Tomatoes tend to get quite big, so a little pot like this is going to be a bit of a problem because it's going to get real root bound and it won't get all that big. So I tend to use this for some of my larger plants like tomatoes, where the smaller ones, some of the flowers like nasturtiums or marigolds that might not need quite as much space, I will do that.
And I see that they all have holes on the bottom. And what's the
That's for drainage,
okay.
So that then you just really can't overwater. And especially some of the trays, they're set up a little bit so that they won't be sitting right in water.
Because roots don't like to be submerged in water.
No, they do not. It kind of kills the plants off. Most of the time people think you can't ever overwater. Actually, more plants die from overwatering than underwatering. So.
Right. And for the seed mixture, I will say one of the benefits of having purchased it is it's pasteurized, which means that it's been heated to a degree where pathogens are no longer viable in the soil.
Right. One of the things that is a challenge for every gardener is diseases that are out there. So you really do not want to use your seed starting mix from last year, and I tend to stay away from the garden soil for a number of reasons. One is diseases that might be present, there's tomato diseases that are pretty much just everywhere, potato things. So I stay away from the garden soil and reusing old soil and just start fresh. It's a little bit of an expense, but you don't really need a huge amount unless you're in commercial operation, which we're not. So.
Yeah. Well, now that we have everything assembled here, what are the first things that you would do when you were starting?
Okay, I'm going to assume that you have decided on what seeds you are going to plant and you have those ready. Today, I would like to just demonstrate planting some broccoli and also some nasturtiums. And so once you have all of your things in place, then you're going to need to fill the pots. So you've gathered your trays, your insets, your covers, you have water, you have the seeds, you have something to mark it with. I really recommend doing this someplace where you don't mind getting potting soil on either your clothes or the floor or whatever surface. So I'm fortunate to have a a garden shed and a greenhouse, but you can do this in your garage. You can put a tarp down in your kitchen, just someplace that's easy to clean up. So another thing I really try to be real careful of as we do more and more gardening, our backs can give us grief, so I try to keep things at a height where I don't have to bend down. So I've got some potting soil here, and next I'm going to start filling up my pots out of the bag. And as you do this, you're going to want to leave a little bit of room in the top. And I'll just fill a couple of these for demonstration purposes today.
And why are you leaving extra room at the top?
Well, the main reason is you don't want to have the water just spill out all over the place. So anyway, you can go through and fill up all of those. If you're going to use the smaller one, it's helpful to just kind of hold that right over the bag. Fill it up. When you initially fill it, you can get it pretty close to the top because of course it will settle once the water is in, but if you don't want that water running all over, you want to leave just a little bit of room. So once you have your containers filled and they're in the trays, then you want to get your seeds ready. And I'm going to do some broccoli. Because I love fresh broccoli. Frozen broccoli, not so much, but fresh broccoli is great. I tend to just pour the seeds right out into my hand so that I can get a hold of them a little bit more easily. Germination on most things like broccoli is pretty good, but sometimes with flowers and other things you don't know, and once in a while you get a seed package that's not great. So I really try to always put in a few more seeds than what I need. Now what I'm doing, I'm going to plant 4 seeds kind of in, not in the very corner, but back a bit. And then later, once they germinate, I can, thin those out. But I'll get those in there.
So you let them grow for a little bit, and then you kind of decide which ones maybe are the most rigorous.
Yes.
And then you can see which one
What's got a strong stem, good leaf production. Mm-hmm. Now, a real key thing, I've planted broccoli for many years, so I'm not stopping to look at the back and see how deep I should plant it. You don't want to plant a broccoli seed 2 inches deep because it's just not going to germinate. A rule of thumb is the smaller the seed, the closer to the surface that you are going to plant it. So a broccoli seed is tiny. So basically, if you look at the back of your seed packet, it tells you the depth that you plant it at. And in this case, it's 1/4 of an inch. So, some will be as little as 1/8 of an inch. Nasturtium seeds are big. Those I will plant down 1/2 inch or even a little bit more.
So we kind of have to think about these seeds and how little they are, because the seed that's the only amount of energy that it has to get through the soil. So that's why we like to have a nice fluffy, lightweight soil too, because that little guy has to get right up through that soil, and it only has enough energy to pop its head through the soil and get to the sunlight to produce more energy.
And when we take a look at some of the seeds that I've started, you'll see, like with my peppers, I had some that germinated and some that didn't. I may have just pushed it a little bit too far, and you never know. So you can always replant. So once you've gently pushed those seeds down a little bit, you can cover them up. Once you've covered that up, it's time to water. But I often will do it the other way. If you have a light seed mix, those seeds can kind of easily float to the top, so often I will water ahead. But if you forget to do that, you can water and just water slowly. And then you'll want to check and make sure that your seeds haven't floated to the top, but you can see it kind of bubbles up there, and so it's not a bad idea. You want to get this soaked all the way through, and if a bit runs out the bottom, it really doesn't matter because later on it'll just absorb that back up. I use warm water, and it warms up the soil and it kind of speeds up the germination process. And of course, germination is that process of it sprouting out and growing.
Sometimes when soil comes already pre-mixed in a bag, it's sometimes very, very dry. So this method that you're going to use next really helps rehydrate, because seeds do not like to be dry. They need
they need the moisture, and that's why putting the cover on helps to keep it. It's like it keeps watering itself then. So I've filled that container. I'm taking my warm water, and I'm just going to let that soak in a little bit, and then add a little bit more. Really let that get good and soaked. All right, and when you see it running out, you're probably in pretty good shape. So I'm going to just grab a couple more broccoli seeds. Another thing you can do if you have sort of delayed on planting your seedlings, you can take your seeds, put them in a cup of water and soak them overnight, and that way they split open, and that helps speed up the germination as well. So once that's all soaked in and it's nice and moist, you can just take your seed, drop it down, and gently push it so that it's about 1/4 of an inch underneath the surface. And again, I'm putting in a couple more than what I would need just to make sure that I have enough germination.
Now, if you don't use this whole seed packet, what do you do with it?
You can share them with other people. I also work with the elementary school kids over at Lakeshore. I work with a first grade class, and in a couple weeks I'll be planting seeds with them. So I take some of my extra seeds and share them with Lakeshore Elementary. So that's something else. But you know, a lot of times seeds will come up the next year. I usually don't take a chance. You know, it's a fair amount of work to get your seeds planted and get them going. And so I usually buy fresh. But once in a while we've run short and we'll go, oh, here's some extra lettuce. You know, we'll throw that in and see how it goes.
What do you use to clean your containers from year to year?
We have in the shop, we've got a big sink, and I just use soap and water and pretty much try to make sure that any dirt and soil and potting mix from the previous year is out of there. You know, you get that till you see the water coming out of the bottom. And then nasturtiums I love because deer don't eat them, rabbits don't eat them. They're colorful, you can put them in salads. So, and the seeds you can save, and you know, it's just really nice. You can see these seeds are quite a bit bigger. And these are jewel mix, so you'll see that they're different colors. And it tells me on the seed packet that it's 1/2 inch deep. So with these, because of the size, I just put one in each cell and push it down to about 1/2 of an inch. So once you have all those in, you know, then at this point we are ready to, and we did water that, so I think we're good. I think we're good. I think we're good because, you know, if you take a look, we've got water down in the bottom, and that will just soak up in time. And so these trays are a really nice option. We're going to put that greenhouse cover on. You can get some of the extra dirt off the edge. And then that just covers it up, helps to hold the moisture in and provide a little extra heat as the sun shines in that.
Now that we've seen you plant some of these seeds, how long before they germinate to look like this?
Okay, I planted most of these on March 11th, so you can see how big they are, and also the variety and size. The peppers were planted on March 11th, and they're really quite tiny. but the nasturtiums are already have multiple leaves, and the tomatoes have multiple leaves. My daughter Hannah planted this chamomile, and she planted that probably about March 15th or 16th. So, and that took a long time to germinate compared to some. I have broccoli that germinated in 2 days, and then I had peppers that took 2 weeks to germinate. So it really depends on how warm and sunny it is, the plant itself and how long it takes, and just the general growing conditions.
And usually on the back of the seed packet
it'll tell you a range of time, but like broccoli it'll say 7 to 10 days. It was 2. Something that you can do if you don't have a really warm sunny spot for germinating, you can get a pad that you put underneath the seedlings, and it provides the warmth. So those can help as well.
What about sun? Is the south-facing window enough?
What I do after I plant them in the greenhouse, I bring them actually up into an alcove of our bedroom, which has east, south, and west windows and a skylight. It does pretty well, but you can already see that the tomatoes need to get out to the greenhouse as soon as possible. They're a little bit leggy, and so there they'll have much longer sunlight without any obstruction, and from above and from the 3 sides as well. So that's really ideal. But if you don't have enough south-facing sunlight and overhead light, you can use grow lights as well. And really just a cool fluorescent bulb about 8 inches over your seeds will work very well also.
Because even though we have sunny days, sometimes it's not strong enough. The sun isn't strong enough
yes,
to help.
Right. So then you really want to get the grow lights going.
What are some other considerations for taking care of seedlings to get up to this point?
A couple of things. When I planted these tomatoes, probably about 6 came up. Really, I want to get it down to 2. So you take a look, and like here I've got 3 in this one, and this biggest one is kind of floppy. It's sort of leggy. So I'm going to just actually take that out. I could repot that, but I don't need that many tomatoes, so it's just going to go on the side. So that's one thing, is getting things thinned. I've got some chamomile here, and this is really too thick. You typically aren't going to want to leave more than just a couple of plants. So just very carefully start to pull some out, and you want to leave a good, strong, vigorous one in the middle. And these roots put out long roots very quickly, actually. So, you can just start taking those out. You might want to leave a couple, see how they do, and you can always continue to thin. Also, I have a bare cell there. I can later take one of these that I'm pulling out, make a little hole, and pop it in there as well. So thinning, in the bigger pots, I'll do 2. In these smaller cells, 1 is typically real good for that. The other thing is, on a bright sunny day like today, these little pots will dry out very quickly. So you can water by putting water down below in the tray, or in pots that go all the way out to the side of your tray, you may need to water from above. If you're watering from above, you want to make sure you're not spilling over. But sometimes on a really warm, sunny day, I'm going to have to water even twice in a day because they will dry out. And that's why I like the bigger pots, actually, because they just hold the moisture a lot better. There's just more mass there. Something else that you can think about with the peppers, I just replanted those. I only had 2 peppers germinate out of all the seeds that I planted. So if after the first ones come up, or you've gone past the amount of time, you go, oh, well, that's a failure, you can try planting some more. And then I just put that back on, try to keep a little extra heat in it. So that's another thing. You want to make sure you're not getting bugs or insects that are coming on. If you do, you can hand pick them off. those sorts of things as well.
And sometimes there might be a little white fuzz that grows on the surface of the soil because something's gotten maybe too moist, and I would just recommend just scraping that off, and
Sure.
maybe if there was something on it, just taking off the top and
Right.
letting it dry out a little bit longer.
You want to plant your seedlings when you're going to be around, not before you go on a vacation, because they don't take a lot of time, but they take a little bit of time every day to keep them watered, keep them thinned. Also, once they germinate, you want to get this off, because otherwise, you're going to burn your seedlings as it goes through that plastic cover.
What do you do to get them outside? You just, as soon as it's time for planting, do you just bring them outside, or what's your process?
Well, the only way that would work is if you had perfectly cloudy, still days for about a week. Otherwise, you're going to either, sort of fry your little seedlings. So you do what's called hardening off, and you need to plant about a week to 10 days before you want to plant them. And your seed packet will tell you about, when to plant. In our climate, like cole crops, things like cabbage, spinach, broccoli, they can go out as early as late April, early May, depending on the year. They like cool weather, and they'll do real well with that. But then things like your tomatoes and your peppers, they're tropical plants, and they're just going to sit there and shiver and possibly freeze off. So those, I pretty much wait till Memorial Day. So if I'm going to plant the very end of May, beginning of June, starting around the 20th of May, 25th of May, I start taking my seedlings outside. The first day it's for an hour. The next day it'll be for a couple of hours. The first day or two, not more than an hour of sun, and then I keep increasing. They need to get used to the sun as well as to the wind. If you have a choice and you can plant them on a cloudy day, there's less shock to the seedling. So you really want to prepare them before you set them out in the ground.
Because they've had it warm, cozy, constant conditions inside, and they're not
They're not ready.
acclimated.
So if you got a week to up to 2 weeks to start that process, it really makes a difference.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Keeping It Green. I'd also like to thank Steve and Ellen Terwilliger for allowing us to come onto their home and see their seed starting process. Join us next time on Keeping It Green.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cvctv.org.